Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get into this week's show. Hello, and oh my goodness, thank you so much for joining me today for the very first episode of Sex on the Peach. I'm your host, Peach, and the aim of this podcast is to open up the conversations surrounding sex, a topic that has been steeped in stigma and shame for as long as any of us can remember. This is a fully inclusive, judgment-free zone. There's no weird, there's no normal. There absolutely may be things that feel uncomfortable, but within that we can look at why we've been made to feel that way. To start, I should introduce myself. My name's Peach, and for the past 14 years, I've worked in musical theatre. However, I am now also working as a sex educator and currently in training to be a sex and relationship therapist. I am by no means qualified to be so yet, so all questions that come my way are answered on the basis of things I've learned through lived experiences of both myself and those around me, and also the things I've studied so far. I don't like to call anything advice as such. I'm just offering my thoughts on all the things we've all learned along the way. I've definitely always been the agony aunt of any friendship group I've ever been a part of, and also the person who is happy and comfortable to talk about sex anywhere, anytime, way after the conversation has naturally come to an end. People ask me fairly often what led me to start studying this, and even though it took me a while to actually get here and do it, from quite a young age, I remember people making the joke that once you're married, you don't have sex anymore. And I remember thinking, well, that doesn't sound like much fun. And the older I got, the more I realised how much of a problem this actually is. And not just that people aren't having sex or the sex they want, it's that people aren't talking about sex. And I care about people having a good sex life. And that's really it. It's still considered this huge taboo thing that no one should be conversing about at the dinner table, when actually we are literally here because of sex. We exist because of sex. How could there be a more natural thing to talk about? But also, therein lies the problem. I don't know about everyone listening, but sex education was non-existent for me. And what I seem to understand is for most other people, is sex education taught us these very few things. A, how to make a baby. B, that sex is penetration between a man and penis owner and a woman and vulva owner. C, that sex ends with a male orgasm because that's how you make a baby. And D, don't have sex because you might end up pregnant or catch an STI. Simple, right? Hands up whoever heard the word pleasure. Right, I'm pretty sure that's none of us. Well, anyway, 99% of the time, you probably aren't making a baby. So what then? You turn 16 and all of a sudden it's time to lose your virginity. I live in the UK, so 16 is the age of consent here, but feel free to apply whatever age to the country you're listening from. And then you're surrounded by media and stories at school that most of your friends are making up because they feel like they're supposed to be getting it on with people in the nearest park. So now the world is telling you, you should be having sex all the time, but no one is telling us how, let alone how to figure out what we might actually want. Our sexual journeys are long and complex and also ever-changing. And the fact there isn't any real conversation out there about it means that most people feel lost and confused in what even feels good for them and how to communicate that to a partner. So I'm hoping that these podcasts will help people feel less alone in the sexual space and more confident to start addressing sex and all sex-related topics for the very normal conversations they should be. When it comes to my own sexual journey and acceptance of it, I really learned my way here, and I'm always still learning. Every other episode of Sex on the Peach will be an open conversation with a guest, and whilst there are plenty of experts, or sexperts, should I say, out there, who I'm sure I would love to chat with for some episodes, the vast majority of my conversations are with friends, colleagues, mutual friends. We're all just normal people, and we're just chatting about what living those sexual experiences has been like. Because the thing is, I could talk to every single person in the world about sex, and every single one of us would have a completely different story. So it's a constant learning and evolving conversation, which is one of the reasons I absolutely love it. Over the episodes, I will be revealing multiple ins and outs of my own sex life and sexual experiences, in the hope that that openness may help someone who has gone through something similar. Because if one episode helps even one person feel more secure about prioritizing their pleasure, that's all I came here to do. For full transparency, I currently identify as pansexual, which, for anyone who doesn't know, means that sex and gender identity are irrelevant. The sexual, romantic, or emotional attraction is purely based on the person. Although I tend to mostly have relationships with men and penis owners. My pronouns are she, her, and I currently live a non-monogamous lifestyle, which I think would fall specifically under the category of solo polyamory. That's going to be a whole episode of its own, so if you are looking to understand more about alternative sexual and romantic lifestyles, that will be coming up in just a few weeks. I tend to mostly refer to myself as sexually fluid, and I say that because I've always maintained that I reserve the right to change my mind at any point. So all I can say is where I'm at currently as I record this first episode. My sexuality has swayed so many times over the years, and anyone listening may feel that theirs has too. And that can be confusing. And what no one needs whilst figuring out what feels right or wrong for them is someone throwing a past sexual choice back in their face. Or, oh, well, I thought you identified as this last week. Like, that's cool. I also ate meat until I became a vegetarian. And then I also tried veganism for a while, which wasn't for me. We're constantly working this stuff out, and it's difficult because we are literally brought up in spirals of shame when it comes to sex, pleasure, and everything associated with it, unless you're a heteronormative couple having sex to eventually procreate. Then it's fine. But even still, a lot of those heteronormative couples aren't even having the sex lives they want. So it's all just a bit of a mess, really. But what we can do is talk it through. I certainly did not turn 16, have sex for the first time, and all of a sudden become a master communicator in the bedroom. I mean, I don't even consider myself that now. As I said, I really learned my way here. Although even early sexual partners of mine may say that I've always been pretty direct in the moment, which really just comes from the fact I'm just a bit of an impatient person. And my attitude was, if something doesn't feel good, then it's just wasting everyone's time, really, isn't it? We don't do fake orgasms here. And if you do, please stop. Because hopefully we're going to get you to a place where faking will be 100% unnecessary. Let's get it clear right here and now. Whilst sex is normal, nothing in sex is normal or not normal. Nothing is weird or silly, but at the same time, everything is weird and silly. So it's all good. We also need to do away with outdated gender stereotypes that men and penis owners are the ones that have to be assertive, sexually adventurous, sexually driven, and women and vulva owners are passive, sexually modest, and much less sexually driven, and just looking to please her male or penis owner partner. These stereotypes put huge constraints on relationships of a heterosexual nature and can also result in a huge amount of decreased sexual satisfaction. But they exist. And that is what most people have been brought up to believe. and how a lot of people are adhering to sex within their relationships. It's how men and penis owners have grown up to think they have to behave, and same for women and vulva owners. Even though some of us have broken out of these societal ideals with a huge middle finger up to them, it doesn't dismiss their existence and the amount of social conditioning we have to undo for everyone to embrace their full sexual liberation. So, when I address things like lack of female and vulva owner pleasure, and the fact male doctors removed the clitoris from the medical dictionary, and we get into conversations about things like the orgasm gap or orgasm inequality, which is the fact women and vulva owners are having a lot less orgasms during sex with a man or penis owner, it may feel like I'm having a go at men and penis owners, but I'm not. We all learned our way here. We just didn't learn it right. So I need everyone to be in this with me. However you identify, gender or sexuality, whatever race, size, ability, age you are, everyone is deserving of pleasure. Everyone deserves to be prioritizing their pleasure. And to the men and penis owners who have already been brought up to believe that they could do no wrong in the bedroom and have already seemed to have an issue with me, a female, speaking up about these things on social media, please, I promise you, if you listen to me and to your sexual partners, if you let go of any ego, which we all need to do, but more on that later, I promise you are going to start having better sex too. And you can hate me for that if you want. Anyway, today, whilst today's episode is very much an introduction to me and to Sex on the Peach, this episode is called A Collaboration, Not a Performance, which is my go-to tagline when it comes to sex. We're going to be talking about the 3 C's, which are what I believe to be the 3 key components to unlocking and living your best sexual experience. So, let's get into it. Here is a collaboration, not a performance. Okay, the 3 C's. The 3 most important things about sex, in my opinion, and these are consent, communication, and collaboration. These 3 things all really merge into each other, but absolutely everything I will discuss on this podcast comes with consent being in place. Everything we talk about, it comes from a consensual place. But today, we're going to specifically talk about it. I presume absolutely everyone knows, but the specific definition of consent is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. Without consent, there is no sex. That's it. As I would like to say, consent before intent. Whatever your wants, desires, intentions, no matter how much you have the hots for someone and how much you want to have sex with them, if you do not have consent, you do not have sex. As with everything else sex-related, consent has become almost a taboo topic to even consider discussing, because it gets associated, as it should, with the extremities of lack of consent like rape or sexual assault. But actually every movement you make with someone in the bedroom needs to come from a consensual space. And it also needs to be one of the first things we teach young people when we're educating them about sex. So, getting to the absolute basics of consent. You need to be sure and be absolutely sure that your partner wants to have sex and is absolutely comfortable to do so before you have sex. If someone has said no, don't continue to ask them for sex. If someone is too intoxicated or otherwise impaired to make a clear and informed decision about sex, then you shouldn't be having sex with them. It doesn't matter what someone is wearing, it doesn't matter what time of night it is. If it's not a hell yes, I want this, then it's a no. And on the flip side, you want to make absolutely sure that what you're going into is something you want to do and that you aren't feeling pressured into it. I will be talking about sexual assault and sex within a lack of consent in a more detailed episode at a later date, but these are just some very simple rules that we all need to be following. I know I've definitely had sex at times in my life where I've consented, but definitely for the wrong reasons, even if it's just been to make a situation easier. People might question whether that is consent, but I gave it freely at the time. I fully learned from it. It's not something I would consider doing ever again, and I don't want anyone else out there to either. What we really want is an enthusiastic yes, not the absence of a no. There still seem to be so many grey areas when it comes to consent. Even if someone has had sex with you once, they automatically want to again. That's not necessarily the case. Every time you're in a sexual space with a partner or partners, you need to have consent. You can also withdraw your consent if something doesn't feel right or you no longer feel comfortable. This can sometimes feel challenging to do so, depending on the partner, but that's why it's so important to continue to check in with your partner during a sexual encounter. I know that people look at conversations about consent as awkward and also might make you feel like sex is almost clinical, but it doesn't need to feel that way. And even more importantly, when you have sex with someone, you want to know they want to have sex with you too, right? Because that's sexy. Consent is sexy. And this is one reason why communication is so important. If you can describe to your partner, or vice versa, what you want to do to them, what they're going to do to you, and you're able to make it clear to each other that you're both into it, that's a hell yes. And it can also be super hot. I know that some people aren't about talking during sex. And again, I think that's because we aren't taught that's something you can do. In movies, people tend to just look intensely into each other's eyes. And in porn, well, it's just an absolute free-for-all. But talking during sex can be awesome. Telling your partner, I'm going to do XYZ next, is a great way to determine that consent is still present and also continues to build that erotic anticipation. It also allows you to give feedback during sex, which I am a big fan of, to be honest. Whether my partners have always felt the same, who knows? That doesn't mean I'm constantly just having a full conversation for the entirety of my sexual encounters. Although if you are into that, absolutely good for you. But if something feels good, if something hurts, if you want to switch something up, if you need to grab some lube or a toy or ask for something that you know is going to work for you, it's so important to keep your partner informed. And also, when you're openly communicating what you like or don't like, there's no confusion about whether you're consenting or not. And also, your partner should be receptive to these things, as should you if your partner is saying them to you. Because sex is, as we're about to get even more into, a collaboration. It's two people working together to make the magic happen. Also, there are certain sexual positions or acts that don't allow for so much verbal communication, whether that's something as simple as a blowjob, or if you enjoy choking or being choked during sex, or even something of a deeper or more explorative kink. So it's really important to make sure you know what the other options are before anything begins to keep communicating with your partner throughout. Basically, what we all want to do is make active consent a part of your sexual process. Whether you're single, in a relationship, have casual partners, it is the absolute base foundation. So it's time to stop looking at it as this awkward thing and just integrate it into your sexual practice. Because I promise you, consent is sexy, and you will only have better sex with enthusiastic knowledge of it. Let's really get into communication, because it's probably the main thing standing between you and the sex life you really desire or really want. And I want us all to work together to find a way to cultivate open environments in your partnerships where it's easy to talk about sex and have these conversations about your pleasure. Because sexual communication is very strongly correlated to sexual satisfaction. And what's crazy is we can feel more vulnerable talking about sex than we do actually having sex. Whether it's telling someone you need something in the middle of a sexual moment, or you're sitting down with a partner to actually have a discussion about your sex life, it can be extremely daunting because we're mostly worried about hurting the other person's feelings or having our own feelings hurt. I stand by it that when I go back to the jokes of, once you're married, you don't have sex anymore, it's really because people aren't communicating about it. When you're first with someone and you're really into them, your body is literally releasing dopamine and you feel great. You're having sex all the time, and sometimes you have to take a moment to ascertain whether the sex really feels great or you just feel great with this new person. Because it can be very, very easy to ignore things that aren't completely doing it for you when you're wrapped up in the excitement of something new. We end up talking about pretty much everything else in the world and not sex, which is crazy because it's something that is fundamentally going to be a part of our lives and relationships for the majority of our lives. I also want to make it clear, I want to leave space for those in the asexual community, and this needs to be a huge part of a conversation. But society has never taught us that there's space for people to say, hey, I actually don't experience these urges. So people are just kind of feeling lost in their sexual communication and relationships wherever they're at. But whether you're just casually dating someone or looking to make something a bit more long term, it's important to have those conversations and ask for what you want and need, and ask your partner what they want and need. Because the longer you get into a relationship without having those conversations, the harder it gets to start them. And that's where ego starts to come into play. Because if further into the relationship you decide it's time to bring up sex, it can leave a partner feeling like everything they've done up to that point isn't good enough or hasn't been satisfactory. So then the conversation gets awkward, and then people choose not to have it. And so it goes on, and so it goes on. The sex life doesn't get better, the conversations don't happen because people are afraid of hurting or offending each other, and so people eventually just stop having sex because neither of them are really getting what they want, what they need, and also now no one is talking about it or even trying to anymore. Marriage isn't the problem. Long-term relationships aren't the problem. Although I do think that sex in long-term relationships takes work, it has to do with a complete lack of communication. And if you've let a lot of time pass without having those conversations, you have to almost let everything go that has come before because it's never too late to start. It's just not something we're equipped with. It's a skill, and we sort of have to learn how to do it and just keep going with it and working through it, which is why a conversation around consent, as we've already spoken about, can be a great starting place to just create a space to take that communication further. Our partners aren't mind readers. We aren't to just know the inner workings of someone's sexual brain and body, whether it's a small adjustment we could make that could make a huge difference to their sexual experience or for them to reach orgasm, or deep, deep-rooted fantasies or kinks that they'd love to be able to share with us but don't know how. As with everything sex-related, we aren't taught to do this. So how are we to know? It just seems we're happy to talk about pretty much everything else. You'd happily ask your partner what they want for dinner. Do they want a bit more chili on their meal? So why aren't we asking our partners what they want on the sexual menu? And if they want to add some spice in the bedroom? One of the questions I received this week was actually bang on what I'm speaking about. So I'm actually going to answer that right now because it seems very fitting, and hopefully the example will sum up just how important this topic is. Question. My partner isn't as adventurous as me in the bedroom, and when I broach the subject, doesn't seem open to try new things, but I really want to. I'm not sure how to handle the situation. Obviously, I don't want to make him uncomfortable, but I don't feel like our sex life is 100% fulfilling for me. Okay, so whilst, as I already mentioned, communicating about your sexual relationship is absolutely key and the most important thing you can do, it doesn't take away from the fact it can be an extremely vulnerable conversation. It can also be very exciting, but when one partner might feel hesitant, we are definitely sitting in a more sensitive space. It's super common for sex in relationships to fall into a routine or pattern, whether that's the positions you use, the time of day or night that it happens most, or even who instigates it. So when we're looking to spice things up, it's finding that balance between a candid but also compassionate chat. Even though, as mentioned, we want the sexual space to be an ego-free zone, that doesn't mean we're all there yet. And we all have little bits of ego that we carry. So I think the most important thing is to approach the conversation in a way that won't make them feel as though their current contribution isn't good enough, for want of a better term. And therefore, a good way to start could be to emphasize the things that you do like about your sexual relationship with each other. And also a helpful tip in all communications, sexual or otherwise, is to use I instead of you. Even when we deal with conflict, it's much more effective to say, I feel this, rather than you did this. Comments directed with you can come across as an insult or criticism. So there's a huge difference between, for example, you don't put enough time into foreplay, and I love it when we spend time on foreplay together, and I'd love to explore more of that with you, so that it feels more like an adventure you're embarking on together, rather than a place of blame or shame. So, on that note, when you're looking into trying some new things, try opening sentences with, I'd absolutely love to try, insert example, with you, or would you be open to trying, insert example, and follow it with something like, because I think it would only enhance our intimacy or our connection. This is going to be a collaborative effort. So if it's uncomfortable for your partner, it is understandable that you might want to step away from the conversation and leave it, which you can, especially if you feel things might be sitting in a defensive space. But it is essential that you do come back to it. At the end of the day, we are adults, we're in partnerships, and taking consideration and responsibility for both our own needs and that of our partners is important and should be a priority. And no partner should hope or assume that they can just ignore these conversations that need to be had. Also, if you want to try and turn it into a more playful activity, there are so many partner quizzes out there. You can check one out on Balesa, which is an amazing company I work with, called the Would You Ever quiz, which is essentially a checklist ranging from more conventional sex activities to a more kinkier space that each partner fills out separately. Once you've filled it out, you compare it with your partner to see where things align or not, so that if you've both ticked yes to something, it opens the door for discussion on that. There might be joint no's. There might be a separate yes and no or a maybe. And this at least gives space for a conversation to follow. This isn't to say that this is a time to try and convince someone to change their no, but you can have an open conversation about wants, needs, boundaries, and all of the things that go hand in hand with those. You can also try opening a conversation like this by asking your partner if there's anything they would like to try in bed. Because if we have new desires or expectations from a partner, there's every chance they may also feel the same, even if it's just a tiny, tiny adjustment. But it then gives us the opportunity to show up and level up for our partner as well. I know, I really do. I know it can be difficult, but sex is an important and natural part of a relationship. And if you're looking to be with a partner long term, it's just as important as any other part of the relationship that you would happily discuss without thought. So please do feel comfortable and confident in your communication about this, because the sooner we start chatting, the sooner we can get to the good shit. I hope that helped even slightly. And please do feel free to follow up to either let me know or ask anything else at either my Not Gonna Lie link, or you can email me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. This is just one of so many situations where people aren't achieving the sexual satisfaction they desire, with communication being the main issue standing in the way. And this is also where the collaboration part comes into play, because that is also what's lacking here. Anyone who knows me will have heard me say it about 18 million times that sex is a collaboration, not a performance. It's my number one go-to line. It sums everything up, and it's a fact. You aren't performing for anyone. But yeah, I'm sure we've all had sex with someone at some point and wondered who exactly they're putting a show on for. From the minute you and your partner decide you're going to be sexual and intimate with each other, you are a team. You are collaborating. And so this is why there's no space for ego. If your teammate tells you that something isn't quite working for them, don't let your ego get in the way, because it's not even personal. Their body probably just feels different and reacts differently than someone else you've had a sexual experience with in the past. Every single person, every single body is and feels different during sex. There's no right or wrong or good or bad. They're simply figuring out what your partner likes and works for them, and vice versa. Even if we've had experiences that we might deem good or bad, it's really just that something wasn't working for us. That's not to say it wouldn't work for someone else, but most of the time people just need a little guidance and to put in more of a team effort. So please try not to be defensive or offended above actually making your partner feel good, because surely that's going to feel better for you also. You're working together to create something great, something fun, something pleasurable. Sex is supposed to feel good. If your main thought is how you're performing for someone, then you aren't going to be present in the sexual moment, and you probably aren't going to get the results that you're hoping for. So please, if I can implore you to do anything today after this episode, it's maybe to just go and have that sexual check-in with your partner, to ask them if there's anything that you could do to make sex more pleasurable for them, and to take it as an opportunity to let them know if there's anything they can do to make sex more pleasurable for you. The minute we all start prioritizing our partner's pleasure over our own egos and having them do the same for us, everything is going to change. I promise. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. So there we have it, what I consider to be the 3 most important things to have in place to begin your journey to a more open and fulfilling sex life. Each episode from now on out is going to be rooted in a more specific facet of the sexual space, but I figured this was a good place to start. Consent, communication, collaboration. Before we wrap up today's episode, I'm just going to answer a few more questions that were sent in to me. So here we go. Question: what is your ideal sexual experience? Okay. Well, to put it simply, my ideal sexual experience is one where 2 people are fully receptive and invested in each other's pleasure, because I just think that's where the good stuff happens. As I've said, I'm always happy to be fairly direct in my communication with someone during sex, because I just think to pretend something feels good when it doesn't, why are any of us bothering? But saying that, there's something very exciting that comes with having a partner who is really just paying attention to your reactions, to your body, and therefore uses that as their direction to what feels good and maybe not so good. I also love when there is time to be had to really explore pushing each other's buttons sexually. I think we can all be guilty of knowing what works and sort of racing to that finish line. But I love when there is time to take it slow and build things up, where you can tease each other, potentially find somewhere new that your partner likes to be touched, or a new sensation that they might enjoy. I'm personally definitely a fan of playing with the pleasure-pain line, and I love and hate edging in equal measure because it makes me feel like I'm going a bit insane. But if there's the time and place to play with all of those things, then that would be an ideal situation for me. I see sex really in general as playtime, and I just think the more that you can mess around, the better. Like sometimes things might go a bit wrong, and then you just laugh about it and you continue. That's the best thing, right? Just having that time to have fun with each other and explore, because there's always the chance you're going to discover something new, and we can't be complaining about that. I actually also think that sometimes getting out of your own houses and getting somewhere new can just ignite that all a little bit too. New surroundings just sort of get us going sometimes, don't they? But yeah, that's me, I think. Also, I'm all about the oral sex, so there's got to be lots of that involved. There you go. Now you know. Next question. Tips to masturbate even better. As much as I am full of tips, I do have to confess, I feel like a complete hypocrite delivering them because I am hellish at being an absolute creature of habit when it comes to my solo pleasure life. I don't know where your masturbation game is at right now to say what might make it better, but I would say for a start, try exploring a new erogenous zone on your body. Sometimes, especially during solo play, we just get straight to that end game. But especially if you're involving toys, you can absolutely find new areas of your body that you didn't even know felt good. So I would say give yourself some time and space to just explore yourself with that. If you tend to watch porn, which I get, I do it too, I would recommend switching things up, giving erotic literature or audio porn a go, because it can just lead you to slightly different parts of your imagination because you'll actually be using it rather than a visual. And that can definitely feel like a more enhanced and sometimes more intense orgasm, in my opinion. I'm a huge fan of toys. My favourite being from Bellessa, who I mentioned before. The Pebble, which is a clitoral suction and vibration toy, is exceptional. But, oh my goodness, the Air Vibe has kind of changed my life a little bit. I'm not going to lie, when I first received it, I actually thought it was going to be a little fussy, and I left it in its case for about a week. But honeys, I was wrong. You've got clitoral suction, you've got vibration, you've got penetration. Like it's all going on, and it will easily get you to a dual orgasm. Game changer. And honestly, hard to step away from at times. Like really. Also, I can definitely be guilty of almost using masturbation as a tool, whether that's to help me sleep, or I need to get up and be productive, or even because I'm just like bored. But if you take the time when you're actually just feeling horny and feeling yourself, just allow yourself that time. Take it slow. Basically, just get all involved up in yourself and figure out what feels really good. Maybe even try some edging with yourself so that by the time you get to a climax, it's even more intense. Honestly, there are no rules when it comes to sex and masturbation. And again, it's a collaboration. It's not a performance. This time, you're just collaborating with yourself. No one's watching. Well, if they are, that's a different story, but I'm presuming that's not the space we're speaking in now. If someone is watching, great. Have a great time with that. That's also fun. We'll talk about mutual masturbation at another time. But in this instance, I presume no one is watching. So have at it. Explore yourself. It will only enhance your sex life with a partner also, because you can relay all these new things you've discovered that feel good for you. Last question for today. Long distance relationship sex tips. Okay, I thought this was an interesting one because there's no two ways about it. Long distance relationships can be really tricky. As much as there's the absence makes the heart grow fonder element and the excitement when you do see each other, it presents itself with challenges. And it's definitely important to try as best you can to keep a little spark going throughout. If moving into a long distance relationship is a new experience for you and your partner, even if you're super comfortable with each other sexually, have a check-in about what their likes and dislikes might be when you're being sexual from a distance. FaceTime sex isn't for everyone, nudes aren't for everyone, so do have a little chat about where you sit consent-wise with all of these possibilities. Don't put any pressure on each other and just sort of see what they feel comfortable or uncomfortable with. Once you have this information, you can move forward with whatever of the following ideas sit well with you both. I would say sexting is always a good place to start, as no matter your time zones or schedules, you can let your partner know you're thinking about them and you can just jump right into it. As always, I'd suggest starting slow and building up, as you would hopefully during an in-person encounter. You can refer to experiences the two of you have already had together, and don't be afraid to get really descriptive with each other, because words can be absolute magic and it's only going to enhance your desire for each other. I don't even know if you need to be long distance to do this. I think it's great. The same goes for phone sex. If you prefer to hear each other's voices, then read words on a screen. Then you can even choose your tone of voice to really set the mood and turn each other on. I don't know why I did that. That sounded awful. But you can choose your tone of voice to set the mood and turn each other on. As well, it's just slightly unnerving being on camera. So you might feel more comfortable being more explicit than you would if you turn to FaceTime or video sex. Obviously another great option, but also can feel a little intimidating. It's actually not my favourite, if I'm being completely honest, but I am absolutely for everyone that it does work for. Because you can also use it as an opportunity to see exactly how your partner likes to touch themselves, which is always a good thing as it gives you a greater understanding of what brings them pleasure. If you and your partner feel confident sending nudes, that's great. If that feels a little much, you can definitely aim for partial nudity and have a little fun with that. And choose different ways to cover yourselves and tease each other. If you're comfortable with watching porn, you may have favourite videos that you want to share with each other or even watch at the same time and have that experience. And now there are even toys that you can literally use across countries via apps. So you can wear them and your partner can control them. So if you want to really go to wind up town, this could definitely be something for the two of you to look into. Basically, it's all going to be one big build-up until you see each other again. And it can definitely take work, trust, communication. But if you're truly in it together, then it can be a really sexy and connecting experience. I hope even one of those helped, but please do let me know. Well, that's just about it for today's episode. I cannot tell you how grateful I am to anyone who decided to tune in and listen today to the very first episode of Sex on the Peach. Thank you for coming on this journey with me, and I hope that it may inspire you to have that sexual check-in or conversation with your partner that maybe you've been putting off until now. Let's continue working together to live our best sexual lives. I'll be back next week with my best friend, and we'll be going right back to the beginning of the majority of our sexual journeys, losing our virginity. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love, Peach.